Today we'll look at a project that I have been having fun with for over a year now, making a flagpole work well as an HF antenna. My interest is that I live in a mobile home park with strict CC&Rs against antennas. I'm sure that you'll agree that most HF hams have at one time looked at a flagpole and said, "Wow, that would sure make a great antenna." The one here is in front of the rec center of my mobile home park. But not so fast. Making a flagpole into an HF antenna is not as easy as you might think. And if you call within the next 10 minutes, we'll double your order and include a nifty orange peeler. Off the top of the head, turning a flagpole into an HF antenna might seem simple to many hams. Why, wouldn't it just be a base-fed vertical with radials? But when I thought about my mobile home on its small lot, where was I going to put the radials? I couldn't just shove them under the house or tear up the lawn and pavement. I suppose if I'd had a back 40, radials would be easy, but not on the small, already landscaped domestic lots most hams have. To me, the only real choice is obvious: a vertical antenna that doesn't use radials. By this I mean a half-wave vertical, not a quarter wave. Also, it would not be fed at the base, but somewhere up the flagpole, in the center possibly, or maybe off-center. This to me is the only reasonable design for a flagpole at most ham QTHs. Here then is my complete list of HF flagpole criteria. First, beyond a half-wave design, is a plain pole. Nosy neighbors will immediately notice loading coils, capacitive hats, or tuning stubs. So an HF 14 AVQ or a 5 BTV just won't do. Also for neighbor proofing, the coax must not connect to the feed point part way up the antenna from the side. That too would be a dead giveaway. Instead, it needs to run to the feed point coaxially up the center of the bottom section of the dipole. Next, the pole must be freestanding and of course capable of supporting flags in a good wind. Guy wires are out of the question. Also for me, it must work all bands. This means a remote auto-tuner at the base of the antenna. Additionally, it has to be easy to tilt and lift up. Low-angle radiation is, of course, also a criterion. It's the key virtue of a vertical. And lastly, the antenna has to be high in efficiency. Here then you see the three versions of my HF flagpole. All of them fulfill the complete list of criteria. The original pole is on the left. I built it just for fun in a possible QST article. It was made from surplus military camouflage net poles. They are readily available on the internet. The center version resulted from showing my original design to Bill Hine at Force 12 Antennas in Colorado. It will soon be added to their line. He sent me the materials here to do the prototype, which you see. More recently, I noticed an attractive, well-built 20-foot telescopic flagpole at Harbor Freight, which I easily converted to the same half-wave, center-fed design. It sells for $59. But how does a half-wave vertical dipole compared to a quarter-wave dipole with radials, both at ground level? What are the gains in wave angles? Here are two EasyNex simulations that I did. The red trace is for the flagpole. It's on 20 meters. The black is an equivalent 20-meter ground plane with a full complement of radials. Most hams don't have a full complement, but this one does. Both are 20 feet tall. The other bands are similar. As you can see, the only compromise with a half-wave, no radial vertical dipole is roughly 2 dB greater soil loss. The wave angles are the same, 25 degrees. The amount of loss is much less than that which would be encountered if one were to attempt to use an inadequate radial system with quarter wave vertical, like a lot of hams do. Now let's look at the Feedpoint details. On the left is my original camo pole design. It is much the same for all three. Notice that the coax enters through an insulator at the base of the antenna, shown here in green, and runs to the feed point up the center of the bottom section of the dipole. The middle picture is the details of the connection to the feed point. For strength and ease of installation, I made a transition to 2 short lengths of common 12-gauge insulated stranded wire. On the right is the feed point of the Force 12 version. The stranded wire here exits on opposite sides of the fiberglass feed point tube and connects to the dipole sections via number 10 stainless sheet metal screws. With my initial design, I did not at first know what distance up the flagpole to place the feed point. However, EasyNeck and SimSmith came to the rescue. SimSmith is a nice little free Smith chart program from the internet. Several iterations revealed that roughly 20% up the pole is the best place for the feed point. The impedances here are best for a tuner. Also, the length of the coax to the tuner is short. This is important to minimize SWR loss. Here are the poles again. The arrows point out the feed point, 20% above the base. At the base, you'll see this is an insulator. Remember, this is a full half-wave dipole. It must be insulated from ground. For the Harbor Freight pole, I used the fiberglass tube they provide in the kit for the feed point, instead of, as they suggest, to mount the antenna. Note the added 3-inch black ABS pipe that I used for the base insulator. All 3 poles are supported by an additional aluminum pole section buried in the soil. As mentioned, to be able to work all bands, a remote tuner is located at the base of the antenna, an auto tuner. Seen here is a typical remote auto tuner. This one by MFJ is the least expensive model currently on the market. But how efficient is the flagpole? Is it good 10 through 20 meters? On the lower bands, 80 and 40 meters, this flagpole is short compared to the wavelength. It's a short dipole. The demon of all short dipoles is a battle between radiation resistance and conductor resistance, R sub R and R sub C, seen here. Radiation resistance is that part of the feed point impedance responsible for the signal getting out. That's where we want our energy to go, into the radiation resistance. Conductor resistance, also called ohmic resistance, is the part of the physical resistance of the metal conductors. It is wasted as heat. Only the portion of the transmitter power that goes to radiation resistance makes radio waves. The efficiency of an antenna, therefore, is a ratio of radiation resistance and conductor resistance, as given by the formula shown. To find the efficiency on each band, I began with this little free calculator on the internet. It gave me the AC, or the RF ohmic resistance, of the metal conductor on all bands. The conductor is 2-inch or 50.8 millimeter aluminum tubing. The difference for each band is due to skin effect. The length of the pole is 20 feet or 6,100 millimeters. The figures here are for 80 meters. As you can see, the ohmic resistance on this band is a little more than 0.02 of an ohm. Next, I needed the radiation resistance for each band. Then in combination with the ohmic resistance, I would be able to find the efficiency. This equation gives a reasonable approximation. It's for a short dipole. It works reasonably well for the other lengths too. Note that efficiency is proportional to the square of the length of an antenna compared to its wavelength. This means that radiation resistance decreases rapidly as an antenna gets shorter. That's why radiation resistance is the demon of all short antennas. Here then are the results in tabular form for all frequencies and for all radiation resistances. And as you can see, the flagpole is very efficient. Very little transmitter power gets lost as heat. None of significance on 30 through 10 meters, and only a very little on 40 and 80. Later, I did begin to wonder, though, if I really had to use a remote auto tuner at the base of the flagpole. To find out how much I would have to give up in a longer run of coax if I kept the tuner in my shack, I began by measuring with my vector network analyzer the actual impedances and SWRs for the flagpole on all bands right at the feed point. That's where the SWR is the worst in this system. Here you see just 10, 20, 40, and 80 meters. With the SWR in magenta, I could then determine the plot of the coax loss in my run to the shack. This little free internet calculator made finding the loss very easy. This data is for 80 meters and 25 feet of LMR 400. It is the length of coax I use from the flagpole to my shack. Finally, here is a graph of the loss by coax length for all the ham bands plotted against the percent of power delivered to the antenna. It is for LMR 400 in all cases. Other coaxes have much higher losses, even RG8 or RG214 or 213. Mini 8 is poor, RG58 is awful. Don't even think of using anything but LMR 400 or better. Notice on the upper left that in 5 feet to the base tuner that the losses would be insignificant. But even at 25 feet my run, they are still quite acceptable on 40 meters and higher. Even on 80 meters, the loss is less than 1 S point, 58% or 3 dB down in power delivered to the antenna. That's very usable. So what then is my final evaluation of a 20-foot flagpole as an all-band vertical? Is it a 6-element beam at 60 feet? Well, hardly. But neither is it a dummy load, as many hams might think. I've done a lot of hamming on it. It is excellent against nosy neighbors and CCNRs. It's high in efficiency, and it's easy to build. And the losses are modest, even if you don't use a base tuner. For me, it has been a winner.